Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's the Historical Gamer once again. We're going to be looking at the first MMO that I'm going to be reviewing, World War II Online. This game is a game that actually just recently went free to play, and this review is going to be focusing more on the free to play. I did enjoy the free to play so much that I actually did up and subscribe. At least for a short while, so I can kind of get the feel of what the paid version is. I may do a review on the paid version. You can see there some of the units are locked because free-to-play doesn't have everything unlocked, but it actually has quite a bit of stuff that you can do with a player. I mean, you can fly fighter planes, you can be a rifleman, submachine gun, you can use some tanks, not all tanks, but some of the tanks you can use, anti-personnel carriers as well. So there's actually quite a bit you can do. But this game is a really different game, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit because it's not a game that it's not the type of game that I've ever played before. First, before we look at the graphics here, let's point out it's been around for a while. It has been around since I believe 2001, 2002. It's going on 12 years now that the game has been out. Just like I said, recently went free to play. One thing you will notice is it's a much more realistic game. The engagement distances are much longer in general. It's not a run and gun game that you would see kind of like with Call of Duty. It's much more realistic. I'm not going to say it's 100% realistic. No game is. There are flaws, there are bugs, just like with any other game. Although I will say I haven't, in the amount of time I've been able to put into it in the last week or so, I haven't found any bugs. At least anything that I would call a bug. Some people say tanks are a little bit overpowered, infantry maybe a little bit underpowered, but that's really all personal preference. I think the majority of the people that I've seen who've complained about things like that are people who've been in the game for 10, 11 years, and you know, maybe there have been some things that they would have liked to have seen change over that period of time that haven't. Nothing I can really complain about as far as that's concerned. But as I was saying, engagement distances far longer. You will see, it's not going to be like Call of Duty where you're going to run up to someone from 2 meters away and knife them and somehow they'll die. I mean, it's not Call of Duty. It's not even Battlefield. That seems to have longer engagement ranges than Call of Duty, but it's different than that too. It's almost like Call of Duty on hardcore with extreme, much larger maps. The map in this is actually one giant map. It's 1/2 scale of Europe, so it is hundreds of miles of map. You might complain about the graphics being a little bit dated, but it is really a gem. You'll see there I got a kill there. I mean, that's kind of close range to what I just killed at compared to what you'll usually see. The other thing you need to remember, and you'll see here, is for the most part, damage is inflicted realistically. So you shoot someone once with a rifle, they're going down, they're gonna die. Maybe if you hit an arm or a leg, they might just be wounded. But more or less, in my experience, as an infantryman anyway, you don't get hit multiple times. As someone in a tank, you might, but as an infantryman, not so much. It's realistic. You don't get spawned typically. It has happened to me a few times, but you typically don't get spawned right into the middle of a battle. You might have to walk or run in 3 or 4 minutes, maybe less. I mean, this one here I spawned and was pretty much in fighting right away. The Allies were attacking our city, and I was more or less in a fight right away. But there is a little bit of time that is worth mentioning. It takes a little while to get from point A to point B. So that's something you may want to consider. It's free, so I'm going to say this a few times throughout the video, but I highly recommend anyone who's interested in first-person shooters, who's interested in World War II, who's interested in just a different type of video game, to check it out. I mean, it's free to play. The only thing you have to lose is some time. Like I was mentioning, the graphics are a little bit dated. There you see an APC firing at someone. I don't really have a good view on where. I think I actually ended up seeing him out here in the review, but I certainly didn't see him during the actual engagement. But, I mean, it's such a huge map. I mean, what they have done with this is absolutely amazing. It's a PC-only game, so, you have to have a decent machine. It is older, but you still need 4 gigs of RAM roughly to run the game well. You can run it at a little bit less, but 4 makes it run pretty smooth. I haven't seen any issues with lag, as I would expect with a little bit older of a game. Expect not to have lag, that is. But, I mean, all in all, I don't want to get into 20 minutes of praise because it's still early in the video, but it is a phenomenal game. And my experience with this game so far has been nothing short of awestruck. If you ever wanted a game to accurately model what war or what World War II, for that matter, really was, this is the game for you. That's about all I have to say. The massive map is also tied with a campaign, so they have campaigns that go on where you fight across a battle of Northern Europe, from northeast France all the way through Holland, through much of Belgium, through eastern Germany. I mean, it is a half-scale map of hundreds of square miles that you theoretically can run or walk across. Like I said, the spawns and there's fire bases so that you don't really have to run 20 minutes from battle to battle, but if you want to, you can. The other day I took a tank and drove it for about 25 minutes. I wanted to hit the Allied rear, and I hoped I could surprise them by coming in to their left. Or sorry, not their left, in their rear. So, you know what, I could. There was a unit of ours that was in reserve, and I decided I'd take a really nice tank and drive 20 minutes and try and surprise them. There you see me getting surprised by someone that was pretty clearly there, and I just wasn't being very patient. But that's an example, by the way, of it not being Call of Duty or Battlefield-like. You're not going to run around and gun and get hit 50 times. If you expose yourself and you get hit, you're going down. It's, like I said, it's realistic in that sense. But as I was saying, you know, I drove for 20 minutes, and I'm still not sure what killed me, but I got killed before I ever got to the Allied position. It's definitely an option in the game, but you don't have to do that. Like I said, you can generally spawn fairly close in. This next segment is a segment where I kind of run around, and I believe I jump on a tank shortly. This one is more an example of just showing off the map and what it looks like. This part here, less about the combat. Found a quiet sector on the map. As you can imagine, with a map this huge, you don't always get an area, you know, hugely populated by enemy forces. The campaign is structured, however, so to encourage heavy combat. You will sometimes see lesser populated portions of the map, but you will also, you see there, obviously there's someone around because the tank just fired around it, who I don't know where, but that's another thing that's important to remember. As an infantryman, your range of engagement is far longer than in typical games, but it's not infinite. Tanks have even longer range. They have high-powered optics that allow them to see much further, and in that sense it is very realistic. You can have tank engagements at even longer ranges than the infantry ranges. So in that sense it's more realistic as well. I actually just jumped on the tank and I'm going for a ride. So that's kind of a nice little thing to be able to do. There are transportation units, there are trucks, there are blitz Huns that will allow you to transport 10 squad members all at once from one fire base to another. As I was saying, the spawning is fine. You don't necessarily jump right in battle. It's a little bit less populated in some portions of the game. But, you know, it's not... The way the game works, as you see, I'm getting hit. I'm on the tank right now, which is a bad thing to be. I should have jumped off as soon as I got hit and found some cover. I ended up staying on this tank, and this was actually a very big risk in World War II. If you were embarked on a tank, you didn't want to be in combat, because the tank gets hit and destroyed, so does anybody on the outside. So there I died. That tank just got obliterated. But as I was saying, I'll go a little bit over kind of the way the campaign works. Essentially, there are divisions, and inside divisions there are brigades on each side. So the French, British, and German, and they just actually added the Americans after quite a long time. Here's an example of, by the way, of aircraft in the game. Players fly aircraft. They drive the tanks. You don't get access to all the tanks, all the aircraft in the free play. You don't even get access to all the infantry. You get access to riflemen, submachine gun. You get access to some of the tanks, not all of them. So like the Tiger tank, you would not have access to without a subscription. But you can use a nice version of the PZ3, which is another pretty respectable German tank. You can use one version of the Bf-109, which is Germany's main fighter, but you can't use all the versions. I believe the Stuka, which is a dive bomber, is locked for subscriptions only, and it is a joy to fly. The campaign ranges from a variety of missions. As I said, there are divisions, brigades, and then squads in those units. Most brigades get 300. Here's how it works. Every 7 hours, your brigade will be resupplied or replenished. So for 7 hours, any casualties that you take are not replaceable. You get 300 riflemen, I believe 100 submachine gun, and then other units have different allotments. So if a brigade loses 300 people who play as riflemen, in other words, just like that, they get killed, then they respawn, get killed again. If you lose a total of 300 men in a brigade in less than 7 hours, then you'll be depleted your riflemen. If you lose more than 8 tanks of one type, more than 6 tanks of another type, every unit has its own depletion amount. But essentially, if you lose all of your men, all of your equipment in that period of time, it will be depleted until the next supply. So what happens is the High Command, which is a group of players are in charge of High Command, will order units around on the map, brigades and divisions. They will give them either reserve, attack, defend, or no orders. You can play in any unit that has orders. So a unit might be ordered to attack a town. The Allies will then counter with some units to defend the town, and then the engagement will occur. It's much like headquarters in Call of Duty, where you want to take and hold specific objectives in each town in order to take the town over. Obviously, if you take all the spawn points in a town, including the fire base, which is there's usually a small little supply depot just outside the city. That way the attacker doesn't have to run for very far. It's basically just outside the city. If you take all the objectives in a town, then essentially the other side's most likely going to withdraw their objective for the town, because it just doesn't make sense if they have no point to launch their offensive from. So you have brigades, divisions, and whatnot, and every 7 hours they replenish. So, you get more supply every 7 hours. It does add definitely a tactical level to the game that, as you can see, there's a guy over there. I'm going to shoot him. Another thing about this game, I'm just kind of going off topic for a second, but another thing about this game, you see he kind of fell out the front. I did kill him. You don't get a big shiny notification on the front of your screen, hey, you killed so-and-so, like a lot of the other first-person shooters. It's nice to know when you kill people, but it's a heck of a lot more realistic to not really be sure. In combat, you don't get a little shiny notifier that tells you someone was killed. But anyway, as I was saying, so if a unit gets depleted, then the Allies or the Axis have one less unit to deploy to a city to try and, hold or take it or whatnot. So the combat kind of moves across Europe back and forth depending on which team is doing better, who's having fewer units get depleted, who's having more success on the offensive, defensive, whatnot. And then, when one side ends up pushing the other side back to the other end of the map, they'll win, and then they'll play another campaign, often after a short intermission. I really like the way people die in this, too. I mean, that looked like a pretty realistic fall to me. I'm not a physics expert, but I thought that was a nice little touch. Coming up is actually an example on why you do not want to try and run and gun Call of Duty style, especially as a free play rifleman with a submachine gun. You might have a better chance. But you see that guy just ran by, and I shot stupidly behind him. I didn't have a good look. I shot, alerted him, he ran at me and straight. Now with a submachine gun, I would have had a chance there. But with a single-shot bolt-action rifle, I was screwed as all hell. This is me inside a vehicle. This is actually an armored fighting vehicle. You get realistic views inside the vehicles as well. So, there we see me just kind of, that's the driver's spot. Now, it's not an all all in charge spot. This is done very realistically. Vehicles are done very realistically. You've got a driver and then you've got a gunner that you command, so it allows for a little bit of teamwork, which is kind of cool. So if you want, you can have one player be a driver, one player be the gunner. That would be more realistic. What most people do is they do both, and they'll just drive, and then they'll switch back and forth by pressing some controls. There's a tiny bit of lag there, but it's not, too much. As you can see, I got hit, so I was switching to the gun, but I continue to get hit. Damage is placed on my unit. I'm now kind of wobbling. My sight isn't accurate. I'm not sure where the fire is coming from. And you see, this is incredibly realistic. As I get hit more and more, and I have no idea what's going on, the functionality of the turret kind of goes. One of the crew members gets killed, so I can't drive off. Eventually, the gunner gets killed, and I'm basically just slowly destroyed, which, is on a vehicle like this, if I'm not getting hit by heat rounds, if it's just slow rounds that are penetrating through, I'm not sure if it's an anti-tank rifle or what, but however I'm getting hit, I'm just slowly getting destroyed. I just kind of start firing off some rounds here because I don't know where they are. But as I was saying, the vehicles are modeled pretty realistically. That's a pretty nice feature. I like it. It adds another bit of realism, you could argue, although it would be more fun to drive and shoot at the same time. But as we've already mentioned, this game is pretty focused on being realistic, or as true to realism as it can be. As I was saying about the campaign, brigades and divisions get pushed back, get pushed forward, and one side will eventually win on this massive map stretching from the French coast to just inside the German borders. I believe Metz is one of the further places. My light vehicle. You can shoot people who are sticking out the top, so if they're unbuttoned, you can shoot them, by the way. I don't think I get a kill on this. Someone does. I don't believe I do. But it's definitely a unique way to do things where you need to think things out strategically. Do I really want to use that tank right now? We only have one left for a few more hours. Other things can influence supply as well, so you can launch air raids against factories and you can delay enemy reinforcements to as much as 12 hours. So that would obviously give one side a huge advantage if they replenish 5 hours before the other side, and then, the other side stays depleted for 5 more hours. The massive scale of this means that you could theoretically have thousands of people engaging in a single town. It's a half-scale map of Europe, so that's pretty impressive. Consider the fact that back when the game was more recently released and there were a lot more people playing at the time, I was talking with some people who remembered back, they had battles where you had 3,000 people engaged fighting over a single area, a single town. I mean, that's realistic combat size. I mean, that's a brigade. 1,500 men versus 1,500 men. That's a real-life brigade. Some of the mechanics for replenishment and whatnot have been changed since then, making it a little bit more player-friendly. But I was even told that Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg actually played the game back then. I'm not sure if that was true, but that's what I had heard. And that, just imagine that. Battlefield brags, I think it's they have 64 people who can play in a map. Imagine 150 people. I engaged in a battle where there were at least 100 people on each side. It wasn't as noticeable because things were spread out, so it's not like Call of Duty where you've got a quarter of a mile on the map and you're running around with walls where you can't really move. So I mean, it's not quite as concentrated as we've seen here, but if you get enough people in there, it certainly is a very intense firefight, and you've got to be smart. You see there my anti-aircraft gun getting taken out by a bomb dropped by a hurricane after firing only a few rounds. But really, I mean, I think the thing that impresses me the most about this game is the sheer scale. And as I mentioned, aircraft can be used for more than just bombing equipment and troops, and they can be used to bomb factories. I launched a Stuka raid the other day against a bridge, hit the bridge square. So, I mean, there are a lot of great things to say about this game. Some people will say the Stuka is underpowered and the Allied tanks are too powerful for it. Some people say there's some balance issues. There's certainly things that can be worked out. But for a game that is free to play right now, I don't see how you could really pass up on the opportunity of getting into something like this. If you've ever dreamed of a bigger, a more grandiose version of a first-person shooter, something that really resembled the actual combat, I mean, this is not for a beer and popcorn player. It's more of a thinking man's game. And because of that, they'll never really challenge the AAA titles other than, like I said, that is an older game. Graphics are a bit outdated. They still look pretty good to me for a 12-year-old game. They've updated things from time to time. It's never a game that's going to compete with the AAA titles. We'll put that out there. It's not going to have 5 million people online playing this. It's a thinking man's game. Vehicles can tow, different equipment too, by the way. I didn't mention that. But if you've ever dreamed of something that more accurately resembled what combat would have been like, if you've ever thought, why can't this more accurately resemble a real combat situation, I highly recommend this game. It is phenomenal, and it's free to play. So if it looks interesting, if it's curious to you, check it out. You don't have to subscribe to play it. I'm sure the game developers would love that you did. I played it for about 3 days on the free-to-play, and then I decided I wanted to subscribe. I don't know how long I will subscribe. I'm still new. I'm still kind of deer in headlights because it is such an epic, and the map, I think, is what sold me more than anything. That half-scale map in Europe, basically. The number of units that you can play. It might be a bit dated, but in Call of Duty, you don't take on the role of an anti-aircraft gun. You don't take on the role of a tank. You can do that in Battlefield, but still, it's a special game. It's a game, I would say, that is from a different era of gameplay that we don't see. Because of that, I recommend it. Check it out. It's free. There's no reason you shouldn't get it, just to try it out if you've got a computer. I recommend it, and if you like this review, please subscribe, and I'm out. Have a great day.